It's January 2021. The Red Hot Saints, having won 10 of their last 11 games, are hosting the new-look Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Saints, who were favored to win this game, were 2 wins away from the Super Bowl. It's been 11 long years since this organization last made it to the big game. But now, more than ever, the stakes were higher. Their franchise player and future Hall of Fame quarterback Drew Brees was expected to retire at the conclusion of the season. And without a clear and obvious replacement waiting in the wings, the Saints knew this may have been their last chance to win with this group. New Orleans did have a touchdown lead late in the third, but the Bucs took over in the fourth quarter, sending the Saints home and Drew Brees walking off the field for one last time. Now, you could argue that right here was the moment that the Saints as we knew them came to an end. But the following season in 2021, the fall off without Brees was not all that devastating. They may not have been the 12-win team we saw a year prior, but the 2021 Saints found their way to 9 wins. They may have thought they found their Drew Brees replacement, handing over the quarterback 1 job to 2015's first overall pick Jameis Winston. And to Jameis's credit, he balled out in the first half of the year. But unfortunately, during week 8 versus Tampa, ironically, Winston tore his ACL and the 27-year-old quarterback season came to an end. This team that had life to it completely died after this injury. They lose their next 5 games, and the Saints quarterback rotation of Trevor Siemian, Taysom Hill, and even Ian Book for a game could not get it done. They did find a way to win 4 of their last 5 games, but the Saints' loss to the Eagles in week 11 ended up being the deciding factor to keep them out of the playoffs. A year after losing Drew Brees to retirement, Sean Payton announced that he was stepping away after 16 years in New Orleans. Brees and Payton had been in New Orleans together from 2006 to 2020, and Payton until 2021, but now it was all over. The 2 biggest success figures in Saints history were now gone. At this point in time, the identity was gone, the vibes were different, but there was still some semblance of hope due to the talented players remaining on this roster. Their move to replace Coach Payton was to promote defensive coordinator Dennis Allen to head coach. Allen, who had once been the head coach in Oakland, did not have great results his first go-around. This was not the most intriguing hire, but the Saints wanted to keep their culture in place, which is something GM Mickey Loomis kept mentioning as this happened. They also tried to keep a part of Sean Payton around by promoting his understudy Pete Carmichael as the offensive play caller. Carmichael had been the OC in New Orleans for the last 13 years working under Payton, so the hope was that the offensive structure can maintain as it was. This 2022 offseason saw the Saints add more talent, but lose some of their key players that helped them make deep playoff runs in the 2010s. Players like Teron Armstead, Malcolm Jenkins, and Marcus Williams departed, but they brought in guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis Landry, and Andy Dalton. Speaking of Dalton, the quarterback room was now a mess. Dalton himself was now on his 4th team in 4 years, and there was now 28-year-old Jameis Winston coming off an ACL injury. Winston got the week 1 nod and actually looked really good, but the following 2 games he turned the ball over a combined 5 times, and Dennis Allen had seen enough. From weeks 4 through 17, Saints fans had to endure watching the mediocre journeyman quarterback Andy Dalton start the final 14 games. There were moments of speculation of whether they would bench him or not, but Dennis Allen almost had this weird sense of loyalty to Dalton. Maybe it was an ego thing, as Dalton was signed after Sean Payton left, and Jameis had been a returning player from the Payton era, but that's just speculation on my end. And maybe the most depressing thing about this 2022 season was the Saints did not even own their first-round pick. See, the year prior in the 2022 draft, New Orleans traded their 2022 and 2023 first-round picks for 2 picks in the 2022 draft. While they did end up landing Chris Olave and Trevor Penning, it made this already boring 2022 season seem even more pointless with no end goal in mind. Luckily for the Saints, who began the year at 4-9 and really could have gave the Eagles a top 5 pick, they rattled off a late season 3-game win streak. This meant Philly now owned the 10th overall pick in the 2023 draft thanks to the trade that happened a year prior. With 2022 mercifully coming to an end for the Saints, it was tough to point out where things got better. The offense got worse under Pete Carmichael, there was still no answer at quarterback, Dennis Allen was underwhelming, special teams was awful, and the salary cap situation was not in a healthy spot. For one of the Saints' better players, wide receiver Michael Thomas, he had only played in 3 total games in 2021 and 2022 combined. He was taking up a large percentage of the Saints' salary cap and essentially made no impact on the Saints for the last 2 years. I guess this is chalked up to bad luck, but still another reason to feel down about the Saints' situation as a whole. In 2023's offseason, people were aware of the Saints' salary cap being in a bad spot, but in typical Mickey Loomis fashion, they found their way around it. To sum it up, they had to restructure a few contracts, converting salary cap into signing bonuses, and adding on void years to those contracts, coinciding with the league's salary cap going up after COVID's impact, of course. It's effective, but not to say this hasn't impacted the Saints before, because it has. Even losing edge rusher Trey Hendrickson in 2021 was a massive loss due to salary cap restrictions. In March of 2023, the Saints made a move hoping to put an end to their quarterback quest since Drew Brees retired. They ended up signing 9-year veteran Derek Carr to a 4-year, $150 million deal. Carr, who had his moments of greatness with the Raiders at times, was brought in to be the guy who could take the Saints franchise a step further. At 32 years old, the league pretty much knew who he was by this point. An average to above average starting quarterback who throws a pretty deep ball, but still doesn't have the mobility to overcome a bad offensive line. I personally believe this is where the Saints went wrong. When you sign a guy like Derek Carr, you're basically trying to stay in the middle. I'm sure Carr could win with a great roster, but this Saints roster at this point was not great. They would never be good enough to win a Super Bowl, but most likely won't be bad enough to earn a top 5 pick either. To make this sound even worse, this was not the first time Derek Carr and Dennis Allen had been paired up before. The two had coexisted in Oakland for 4 games during Carr's rookie season, where the Raiders started 0-4 and Allen got fired before even reaching the month of October. The 2023 offseason also saw the Saints lose some talent and veteran leaders. Andy Dalton, Mark Ingram, Jarvis Landry, Marcus Davenport, Caden Ellis, David Onyemata, Bradley Roby, Chris Harris Jr., and PJ Williams. When the Saints signed Derek Carr, the goal was clear: to win the NFC South and make the playoffs. Through 7 games though, the Saints found themselves at 3-4 and coming off a tough Thursday night loss versus Jacksonville. This was the game where Derek Carr and Chris Olave got into it on the field, and Foster Moreau dropped a would-be game-tying touchdown. At this point, Carr was off to a very underwhelming start, and the Saints were under 500. To his credit though, Carr played very well the final 10 games of 2023. A completion rate at 72%, 19 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, and a passer rating of 110. Heading into the final week of the regular season, the Saints needed a win of their own and a Buccaneers loss in order to make the playoffs. The only problem was the Bucs were facing off against a 2-14 Carolina Panthers team. The Saints handled their own business, destroying the Falcons and scoring 48 points in the process. For the Buccaneers though, they won their matchup by a score of 9-0. Really, Panthers? The 2023 Saints ended up right where they were supposed to be, a borderline playoff team. With a better run game and pressure rate, the Saints probably get to 10 wins, but this team had its flaws. In the 2024 offseason, now 4 seasons removed from their last playoff berth, some changes had to be made. First was firing the offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael, who spent 18 seasons on the Saints staff. Michael Thomas, who had been with the Saints for 8 seasons, was not brought back for obvious reasons. Offensive lineman Andres P. and James Hurst due to retirement, they departed and created more holes on an already struggling offensive line. The main focus, however, was fixing the defense. Former 2nd overall pick Chase Young signed a 1-year prove-it deal, and former Chief Willie Gay Jr. also signed for a 1-year deal. Entering 2024, the Saints were viewed as one of the more boring teams in the NFL. Their win total was set to 7.5, a downgrade from last year's actual win total, and Dennis Allen was top 5 in odds to be the first head coach fired. After the first 2 weeks of the regular season though, the Saints looked like one of the best teams in the entire NFL. Their new offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak turned out to be a sensation halfway through September. Kubiak's offense was so good that Saints fans were crediting him for crime being down in New Orleans. And no, I'm not joking. Through 2 games, the Saints had put up 91 points, the most in the NFL. At this moment in time heading into week 3, it felt like the Saints had some real hope for the first time in 4 years. However, this team that took the NFL by surprise in mid-September looked completely different by early November. The Saints went winless from weeks 3 through 9, a 7-game losing streak topped off by a loss to the dreadful Panthers. To no surprise, Dennis Allen, who had been the head coach there for over 3 years, was fired. While the Saints may have dealt with a ton of injuries during this losing streak, and we'll get to them, there was really no reason for the organization to stick with Allen. Dennis Allen was a defensive head coach, yet the Saints were allowing 28.5 points per game during their 7-game losing streak, including the Tampa Bay Buccaneers scoring 51 in New Orleans. Derek Carr missed 3 games with an oblique injury, and the offense under rookie quarterback Spencer Rattler was horrendous. They also missed Chris Olave for basically 3 full games due to multiple concussions, and breakout wide receiver Rashid Shaheed's season came to an end after week 6. picks. The offensive line, which at one point looked like a major advantage, was all of a sudden ravaged with injuries. Eric McCoy, their Pro Bowl center, missed 7 games. I mean, really, it was 8 games. Their right guard and former first-round pick Cesar Ruiz missed 4 games. And the one that people often forget about is their all-pro right tackle Ryan Ramczyk. Ramczyk, who was in the middle of a 5-year, $96 million contract, is missing the entire 2024 season due to complications from knee surgery. And even some other guys I haven't named, like Paulson Adebo, Taysom Hill, Marshawn Lattimore, all missed multiple games. At one point, their offense was just Alvin Kamara and nothing else. As for Marshawn Lattimore, he has not played since week 8, but he's no longer the Saints' problem. He was traded to the Commanders at the deadline. As we sit here today, the Saints are 4-7, and actually a perfect 2-0 under interim head coach Darren Rizzi. But we all know what happened the last time the Saints went 2-0. Even at 4 wins now, some guys are getting healthier after the bye. It still feels like this team is too good to bottom out. They seem stuck in mediocrity for the near future, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Maybe as some of their veterans like Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, Derek Carr, Demario Davis, Alvin Kamara, as they get closer to the end, then maybe they could bottom out. But if you're New Orleans, why not trade some of these guys? Maybe not Cam Jordan because he's a lifer, and at this point, I feel like not many teams would want him anyway. But for Carr, Kamara, Demario Davis, Mathieu, and whoever else can get you good draft compensation, the Saints should be looking to move those guys. The plan on paper seems pretty genius. You take your medicine in 2025, end up with the first overall pick, and in 2026, you take the hometown kid Arch Manning first overall. Of course, Arch's grandfather, Archie Manning, played in New Orleans for 11 seasons back in the 70s and 80s, and now over 40 years later, his grandson Arch could be the quarterback one in New Orleans. Just an idea, but it definitely has a storybook feel to it. We'll see if the Saints decide to move on from some of their veterans for draft picks. I would highly recommend it, but as for right now, they are really stuck in the middle, and as the title suggests, they do feel a bit hopeless right now. That's gonna do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll talk to you guys next time.